Dear church, let's talk about not missing the headline. A man and his younger brother walked into a bar. The man had struggled with alcohol abuse but had been sober for over a year. Now he wanted to share what he had learned with his brother, hoping that he wouldn't make the same mistakes. The man said to his brother, "I want to show you something," and he reached into his pocket and pulled out a case. He asked the bartender to put 2 glasses on the counter, one filled with water and the other filled with liquor. He opened up the case and he pulled from his pocket 2 worms. He put one worm in the glass filled with water and he placed the other worm in the glass filled with alcohol. And after a few minutes, the worm in the glass of water was still moving around, but the worm in the glass of liquor had died. The man looked at his brother and he said, "Do you see that?" His brother replied, "Yes." And the man asked, "Do you get the point?" And his brother responded with, "I do." Just to make sure, the man asked, "Okay, so what's the point?" To which the brother replied, "I think it's clear that if you drink a lot of booze, you won't have a lot of worms." And I think it's safe to say the young man missed the point. So many in our society do as well. They miss the point when it comes to Jesus, especially this time of year. Do we get it? I mean, are we keenly aware of what Emmanuel, God with us, means for us? You go back to the birth of Jesus, not the one in Matthew or Luke. No, go to the one in John's record. And you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, John's gospel doesn't contain a record of Jesus' birth. And to that, I would say, sure it does. Although there's no lineage or manger or Mary, John does speak to Jesus' beginning. Look at it with me. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, not even one thing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not grasp it. A man came, one sent from God, and his name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that all might believe through him. He was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. This was the true light that, coming into the world, enlightens every person. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, and yet the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own people did not accept him. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And we saw his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified about him and called out, saying, "This was he of whom I said, he who is coming after me has proved to be my superior, because he existed before me. For of his fullness we have all received, and grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth were realized through Jesus Christ. No one has seen God at any time. God, the only Son, who is in the arms of the Father, he has explained him." John opens up by telling us that Jesus is eternal, that because he was there at the beginning, he had no beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Anyone familiar with the Bible read John's words and note that they are an echo of Genesis 1:1, in the beginning. Whatever else John is going to tell us, he wants us to know that this is a continuation of the story. This is a book about the Creator acting within his much-loved creation in the way that he has said that he would all along. This is the climax of the entire redemption story. The highlight in Genesis 1 is the creation of humans made in God's image. The highlight in John 1 is the arrival of God made human. The Word becoming flesh is the highlight. However, Jesus wasn't born. That's not the headline. The headline is that God became a baby. God was in the crib. That's the headline. Isaiah said it some 700 years before Jesus' birth when he wrote, "For a child will be born to us, a son will be given to us." The child is born, but the son is given. The son existed before the child was born. The virgin gave birth to a child, but the child the virgin gave birth to existed before the virgin ever got pregnant. That's an important point to remember when it comes to understanding the story. The son was given, not born. It is true that God chose to make his entrance into this world in a manger in Bethlehem, but that event, that birth, does not signify the beginning of Jesus. The Creator chose to be created. But the manger held so much more than just a baby. It held the peace with which Jesus calmed the storm. It held the power to turn 5 loaves and 2 fish into enough food to feed 5,000. It held the new eyes which allowed the blind to see. It held the new legs which allowed the lame to walk. It held living water so that the Samaritan woman at the well would never thirst again. It held the Beatitudes. It held the tears that Jesus shed for Jerusalem. It held Lazarus' new life. It held the cross. It held the empty tomb. The manger contained all of these things and more. It is one of the 2 most significant events in the history of the world, the other being the resurrection. Jesus' birth is the event up to which everything before it led and to which everything after it points. It shows that, number 1, God is faithful, that He keeps His promises. God promised Abraham that in his seed all the nations of the earth would be blessed. The descendants of Abraham waited and waited and waited for the fulfillment of that promise. Then came the seed, Jesus Christ, the descendant of Abraham, through whom all nations of the earth are being blessed. Israel waited. They waited for the Son of David, who would come and rule and reign over an eternal kingdom. Jesus is that long-awaited King. The faithful Jews waited their entire lives to see God's salvation and the redemption of Jerusalem. So the coming Messiah meant everything to them. And it certainly means everything to us because the birth of Jesus was the birth of hope. Jesus' birth came with an announcement. And the announcement was this: God is faithful. He always keeps His promises. Another lesson that we learn is that God is not distant. That's what the birth of Jesus is all about. God is not some aloof, faceless, unconcerned designer who created everything and now just sits back and spectates. No, He came and He took up residence with us. He became one of us. He saw with our eyes. He listened with our ears. He felt things with our feelings. He hungered. He thirsted. He wept. He got tired. He bled. He died. Imagine the President of the United States deciding by his own free will to become a mouse. He decides to become a small, furry, insignificant little rodent. He chooses to be vulnerable and helpless. He chooses this because he wants to live among all the other mice. So he leaves the White House and the prestige and the honor that come with that position, and he becomes a mouse so that he can help all the other mice. There are mouse traps in kitchens all around the world. The people who own these kitchens are determined to kill every last mouse, and one after another they are killed. The president shouts at the mice until he is hoarse as he warns them of the danger and tries to steer them away from the smelly cheese on the deadly mouse traps. The most powerful man in the world happily becomes a mouse because he loves mice and he wants to save them. Okay, maybe that's not the best illustration, but hopefully you get the point. God left the lofty to live with the lowly. Why? Very simple. Because He loves us. Another lesson we learn is that God became one of us, and there's a lesson in that. God becoming a man and dwelling among us has ramifications far greater than can be captured by our common view of Christmas. One of the members of the Godhead emptied Himself, as Paul put it in Philippians 2:7. You think about what that means. Jesus surrendered His deity. He put on flesh and gave up His omnipresence. He was also no longer omnipotent while in the flesh. He got tired. He got hungry. He got thirsty. He cried. He hurt. And Paul says that not only did He empty Himself, but He also took on the form of a servant. The Son of God gave up His rights and His privileges, and He washed feet. And you know what that means? It demands no less from us. We too must be willing to get dirty. Mary had the little lamb, and that lamb would die for her sins and for the sins of the entire world. In that manger, that fateful day in Bethlehem, lay not just a baby, but the God of heaven who came to earth to dwell with the very people He created. And what often gets lost this time of year is that the baby was born to die. Man had a problem that he was completely and utterly incapable of resolving on his own. So God said, I'll just come down there and I'll fix it myself. Let's look at it like this. Let's say we all go to California and we get in the ocean. We're all going to race to Hawaii. You may swim farther than me, but we'll all be in the same boat eventually. You may be a better swimmer than me, but who cares? Hawaii is too far away, so when it's all said and done, we'll all find ourselves being pulled out of the water. Or let's say we have a rock throwing contest. We all get a handful of rocks with the goal of throwing them to the North Pole. You can throw farther than me. You may have a stronger arm than me, but it doesn't matter because none of us are throwing a rock to the North Pole. In the same way, your pile of sins may not be as high as mine. Your list of transgressions may be shorter than mine, but what does it matter? Without a Savior, we all end up in the same boat. We need a rescuer. We need a manual to connect unholy people to a holy God. The story is told of a son who wanted to get his dad the perfect Christmas gift. He came across an exotic talking parakeet that could speak 5 languages and could sing the Yellow Rose of Texas standing on one leg. The son said to himself, I've never seen a bird like this. I have to get this for my dad. So he bought the parakeet. He paid a very expensive price, and he sent it to his dad for Christmas. And after a few days, the son called his dad and asked him, Dad, did you get my gift? He replied, Yes, I did. Well, how did you like it? Asked the son. The dad said, It was delicious. The dad completely missed the point of the gift. And so do Christians. Many completely miss the point of the gift. Emmanuel, God with us, is about the long-awaited Messiah coming to rescue us from sin and death, just as the law and the prophets promised. Now think about that. If our greatest need had been information, God would have sent us an educator. If our greatest need had been technology, God would have sent us a scientist. If our greatest need had been money, God would have sent us an economist. If our greatest need had been pleasure, then God would have sent us an entertainer. But our greatest need was redemption. So God sent us a Savior. Mary had the little lamb so that you and I could have the biggest hope. In department stores all over the United States this time of year, you will see displays of Christmas trees flocked with fake snow, lit up with lights, ornaments hanging from its branches. There's a star on top, a skirt around the bottom, and around the base of the tree are gifts wrapped in decorative paper with elaborate bows topping them. Many of us have a very similar display in our home this time of year. But there's one major difference between the gifts under our tree and the gifts under the tree at, say, Dillard's or Target or Walmart. You know what that major difference is? Yeah, the boxes under our tree are filled with something. The boxes on display at the department store, they're empty. They're just for show. They have all the glitter and color and decor associated with the most materialistic holiday of the year, but they're completely void of anything meaningful. And in a sense, that's what Christmas has become for many people, many Christians even. It has been emptied of its true meaning. It has become about presents rather than presence. As I said last week, my view of the holidays in relation to the church is that I think we as Christians should redeem them. I think we should take full advantage of the opportunity to talk about Jesus at Christmas time. Our world has become more consumed with trees, with presents, and with Santa and flying reindeer. When the whole world is at least giving some attention to Jesus, I want to help them understand more about Jesus. I want to promote Jesus at a time when everyone else seems to be commercializing him. I'm not going to spend my time arguing about how he wasn't actually born on December the 25th. I want to spend my time helping people understand why he was even born in the first place. I want to help people unwrap this amazing gift so that they can truly see what the incarnation is all about. If you have your Bibles, look with me at Luke chapter 2. Beginning in verse 15, here's what we read. When the angels had departed from them into heaven, the shepherds began saying to one another, Let's go straight to Bethlehem then, and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has made known to us. It wasn't enough for the shepherds to merely hear the good news that the Messiah was born. They had to go and see for themselves. This wasn't just a birth announcement. This was a calling. The shepherds wanted to be a part of what had taken place. For them, it was more than an event. It was an experience. And that is what it should be for us as well. Jesus isn't the reason for the season. He's the reason for everything. Without him, not only would Christmas have no meaning, but life would have no meaning. So we have to see the birth of Christ as more than an event. Like the shepherds, we have to go to him. We must experience him. Let me ask you this. What's your Christmas story? Now understand, I'm not asking what your traditions are, whether you open presents Christmas Eve or Christmas morning. I'm asking, when's the last time you visited Bethlehem to see this thing that has happened? You see, I think we often leave ourselves out of the story. We can name the main characters. There's Mary, Joseph, Jesus, angels, the wise men. But what about you? Do you name yourself as an essential character in the story? I think we have become forgotten characters in the story of Jesus' birth. I think we focus so heavily on the particulars of the event that we omit ourselves from the story. You go back to John chapter 1, and without a doubt, one of the most exciting things about this passage is you're in it. Notice verse 12. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name. Folks, that's us. Anyone who would receive him, anyone at all, family name, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, none of that matters. This great drama of a God who reveals his glory through the Son is a play in search of actors, and there's a part for everyone, you and I included. You see, while this is a passage that is often associated with Christmas and the advent of Christ, it's so much more than that. This isn't just about the birth of Jesus. This is about the full meaning and magnitude of everything he was and is and did and will do. And guess what? You are at the center of this story. Now, that's not to give you the big head or inflate your ego, lest you get to thinking too highly of yourself. Remember, Jesus came because you were nothing without him. So the story isn't about you, it's about God, but what God did for us brings you into the equation. You're not the star of the show, but you do play a pivotal role. God featured you from the very beginning. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth." Why? Why would he create this life form that we know as human? The answer is simple: to love. God wanted a relationship with mankind, and that's exactly what he got, at least in the beginning. But there was another reason for God making man, something that we've talked about quite a bit this year. We were made to be image bearers. In the Greek, it's icons, representatives and manifestations of our Creator in the world around us. In one day in 2012, cyclist Lance Armstrong lost 8 of his 11 sponsorships. A few days later, every endorsement deal that he had was terminated. The iconic cancer survivor, whose name had become synonymous with championship cycling, lost an estimated $150 million. Not only that, the 7-time Tour de France winner had all his titles stripped and was banned from cycling for life. The reason? He had taken a banned substance and tried to conceal its use. Apparently, he had also bullied and threatened people on his team in an effort to keep them quiet. Obviously, major companies like Nike and Oakley wanted nothing to do with Lance Armstrong. They tried to distance themselves from him because they didn't want to give the appearance of supporting a cheater. If they continued their sponsorship of Armstrong, it would have reflected poorly on them and hurt their bottom line. We were made to represent our Creator. God said, "Let us make man to look like us." From the very beginning, the goal was for man to be a mirror. We were made to be a visual representation and manifestation of the one who made us. Paul said it well in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 49, when he wrote, "Just as we have borne the image of the earthly, we also bear the image of the heavenly." However, though we were made to be a mirror, sin caused our reflection to look like one of those carnival mirrors. You know what I'm talking about? God's image became distorted. Because of the fall of man, we live in a world full of carnival mirrors. As time goes on, it gets harder and harder to recognize the standard. You forget what the true reflection should look like, and that's where Jesus comes in. Jesus came to be a visual representation and manifestation of the unseen God. He came to show us what we're supposed to look and be like. He's the standard. He came to clear up the distorted image. God would have been justified in pulling his sponsorship. He would have been completely within his rights to distance himself from us because we have been a poor reflection of him. But Jesus redeems what we have distorted. God became like us to restore us to the image for which we were created and to insert us into the story that he has written. Long ago, there ruled a good and wise king. This king loved his people. And because he loved the people he ruled over, he wanted to know how they lived. He wanted to get acquainted with their hardships. So he would often dress in the clothes of a beggar and go to the homes of the less fortunate. No one he visited with knew his true identity. And on one occasion, the king visited a very poor man who lived in a cellar. The king ate the coarse food the poor man ate. He spoke cheerful and encouraging words to him. Then he left. Sometime later, he visited the poor man again, but this time he was dressed like a king. He donned the crown, was accompanied by his royal soldiers. He disclosed his identity to the poor man by saying, "I am your king." And the king was certain that the man would ask for some sort of gift or favor, but the poor man didn't. Instead, the poor man replied, "You left your palace and your glory to visit me in this dark and dreary place. You ate the coarse food that I ate. You brought gladness to my heart. To others you have given rich gifts, but to me, you have given yourself." That is our story. The king left his palace and came to visit us. He became one of us in order to rescue us. That's the headline. That's the point of the story. It's not about presents. It's not about gifts. It's about presence. It's about God being with us. And going forward, it's about us being with God. You see, this life is preparation for eternity. This life is where heaven is won or lost, right here, right now. This is where we fine-tune, we tweak things, we do a complete overhaul, we dismantle things, we do whatever we need to do to get in shape for heaven. We pack our bags, we prepare. What are you doing to prepare for heaven? What are you doing as you live with God now on this earth so that you can live with Him for all eternity? I think so often this time of year we give credence to the fact that Jesus was born. We celebrate His birth, but do we really understand, do we really grasp the meaning and magnitude of that for us? That God became flesh and dwelt among us. In the original language, it means that He tabernacled among us. God became one of us to save us. So what does that mean for us going forward? Well, it should mean, among other things, it's something that we celebrate, not one time, one day in December, but every day. As I said before, Jesus is not the reason for the season. Jesus is the catalyst for everything that we do. His character, His will, His teachings should permeate our being. And so we follow hot on His heels. We tailgate Him, so to speak, because we want to follow as closely as possible. You may remember the word disciple refers to being as much like your teacher as possible. You want to resemble Him in every way. And if Jesus is our teacher, let alone our Savior, then we want to be like Him in every way. So we follow closely. We stay hot on His heels, so close to Him that if this were, a walking in the desert, the dust from His sandals is kicking up in our face. We want to be as close as possible. We want to serve Him diligently. We want to live at the center of His will so that we can live with Him for all eternity. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Dear Church podcast. We welcome your comments and questions. You can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.